I'm going to talk about your Attorney General, who decided he's going to take on a war hero. Now, I can't say whether Attorney General John Bruning has any military experience, but I doubt it. But I do believe he's probably seen some war movies with John Wayne in them, and he's probably seen some Rambo movies too, so that probably qualifies him. He may have been in the Boy Scouts, and had he not been in the Boy Scouts, I'm sure he knew some Boy Scouts. So he's going to come bounding in like a puppy and say, I'm going to take on Senator Hagel, because people don't like what he's saying about President Bush and what he's saying about the war. So he had a poll taken, and the poll in effect said, do you like what Senator Hagel is saying about President Bush? Heavens no. 65% say heavens no. 35% say Hades yes. So in my poll, I got this many more points than Senator Hagel. Look how many people like me. Do you like what he's saying about impeach the president? Same answer, same breakdown. So he's way ahead of Senator Hagel. Now, Senator Hagel is a professional, as a politician. He is a heavyweight. John Bruning is a lightweight, not physically speaking, of course. When he was in the legislature, I don't remember how many years he was here, but I don't know if he passed a bill for every year he was here, and he was not here more than 6 years. He's running for a legislative position, and he has no record as a legislator that would recommend him to anybody to send to the U.S. Senate to take Senator Hagel's seat. Senator Hagel not only has seniority, he has clout, and he is respected, and he is a man of the world from having traveled throughout the world. And here John Bruning is not even doing his job as the Attorney General. As some people might figure, I'm bitter against John Bruning because he won't do his job as far as this execution protocol. He wrote a response and admitted that there are doubts about it. But he's not going to get involved because he's running against Mr. Hagel for the U.S. Senate seat some months down the line. So he's got to get this poll taken and put that in the newspapers. You know why I say he's not doing his job? His job as the Attorney General is to defend the legislation which we enact. There's a bill, LB 1024, languishing in court, which his office will not defend. The Constitution and the laws place that duty on him, and he's not doing it. That's point one for Mr. Hagel to use. Do your job as Attorney General. You can't handle that. But that ain't all, brothers and sisters. You've seen this guy who sells you all these inventions. I got a butcher knife. I've got a steak knife. I've got a paring knife. But that's not all. I've got something you can stick in a turkey and stick it in this little device, and he'll be cooked to a turn in 3 minutes. And that ain't all. That's Bruning. But that ain't all. We were considering a bill that would narrow the application of the death penalty. So whereas Bruning won't defend a law that's on the books, he said, I will challenge that in court because it's unconstitutional, and no bill had been passed. It wasn't even in its final form. But that's what he said. That's political posturing. That's the man who's going to take on Hagel, the professional. Bruning has not been in a political campaign where hardball is played. He doesn't know what a campaign means. He's poor Johnny One Note. Why, that's dastardly. He'll jump up here and say all these things he'd say if he's running for an office on the university campus. He cannot stand up to Chuck Hagel. Hagel will swat him like a gnat, and I'll move on. Now we come to this protocol. And he says the court may rule one way on it, the court may rule the other way, meaning that I could be right, that it was not adopted by following the procedures of the Administrative Procedures Act. He said the authority in the country is split, that the issue I raised would require an answer, and the answer is far from easy to give. And he said a court might do this, it could do that.
Time.
But when, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Chambers, you are recognized.
When the state is going to kill it should not be an iffy situation. The fact that he can talk about the uncertainty should cause him, as an ethical lawyer, to take that before a court and see what the court does say. You're going to kill somebody under circumstances where there's a cloud over the procedure. It may not be the correct one, but he said he's not going to get involved. What does that procedure consist of? They had talked to this so-called expert down in Florida where they've had some botched executions. A Dr. Wright, without giving his credentials, who told them to pass a current of electricity through a person's body. And the voltage would be 2,540 volts or 2,450 volts for 15 seconds. Now, if he is an expert, and Senator Fulton is hobbling out, but he could confirm this, if a formula is laid out based on scientific principles and expertise, it's valid. And it's not going to have to be modified because somebody questions it. This expert had his procedure challenged by me when I wrote to the Attorney General. So you know what he did? He said, oh, well, not 15 seconds. Run it through him for 20 seconds. And what about the likelihood or possibility of fire? When he was first talking to the department, when they first made a change for the 15 seconds, he wrote in his report, in case of fire, talking about setting the individual on fire. This is a Christian country. 2007. This is what the Attorney General knows can happen. In the case of fire, the use of a fire extinguisher approved for high voltage is appropriate. CO2 extinguishers should be adequate for the task and should be available for use. The current should be stopped before the extinguisher is used. So you're running this current through and the person catches on fire or there's excessive smoke and you stop the current. And you extinguish the fire. Then you check the sponges that are under the electrode on the head, and maybe you soak them or moisten them again and reposition the electrodes, and you start this macabre, barbaric burning again. That's what the Attorney General is saying is all right. That's what you all are approving of. Nobody will say anything on this except me, I'm not a Christian. And I know what barbarism is. And this is barbaric. So when I wrote my challenge to the Attorney General and said that 2 district courts have said, and I'm going to put whatever motions I need up there to finish what I've got to say, this bill I'm through with. I'm not going to mess with Senator Shimmick's bill. And this is not to stop that bill. It's to say something that needs to be said so that the Attorney General, the governor, and the Nebraska Supreme Court will have been called to account, and I will use this transcript so that when they run that juice through that man according to what they're doing, and John Bruning said they should, and the governor approves, and the court won't step in, and the man catches fire, I'm going to bring this transcript like I'm reading it today. And you all don't care, do you? Where is your compassion, your humanity? I'm not talking about whether there should be a death penalty. I'm talking about the manner in which it's carried out. Even with lethal injection, 11 states have suspended all executions because of problems. And they have a death penalty. They're not talking about abolishing the death penalty.
1 minute.
And it has happened as a result of legislative action, judicial action, and gubernatorial action. And we don't have a man worth his salt in any position, in the governor's office, in the Attorney General's office, sitting on the Nebraska Supreme Court. Cowards all. Moral cowards all. So let's say they carry out the execution in the middle of our legislative session. That's what they're going to do. And it winds up going to court, and the court says, well, yes, that protocol was not adopted legally. It should not have been used, but the execution was done. That's tough. That's not the way I feel about it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Chambers. Senator Shimmick, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Chambers, would you like some more time?
Thank you, Senator Shimmick. I would.
450.
I make no bones about the fact that I don't want the state where I live to kill anybody. And I'm trying to stop it from doing that. And I will leave no stone unturned, and I will use anything at my disposal to do it. But that's what happens when you're not one of these hypocrites who say, I respect life everywhere, but it might be politically inconvenient to do something here. We have an impending, barbaric slaughter confronting us. A person in that electric chair is burned to death. There are fourth-degree burns. The blistering, the burns have been seen on the corpses. The autopsies have disclosed the horrific damage done to a person. But my Christian colleagues say, as they pray every morning to that God, well, that's the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. Now, you all, if you say prayers, pray that the man does not catch fire. Because if he does, since your state is the only one that uses electrocution as a sole means, and I'm going to contact the Supreme Court. I'm going to have a document of everything that I try to do. You think this won't be talked about on CNN, Fox? You think it won't be blazoned around the world? America, which is telling everybody else how to conduct their affairs, is still burning people alive? So let's say that you put the fire extinguisher on the person, and then you have a malfunction with the equipment. They do have an electrician on hand to try to fix anything that happens. So what then? You've got somebody half-cooked, half-dead, sitting in this electric chair, having been extinguished, and they turn the juice off, and you have these witnesses sitting there. When the Attorney General says that this is strictly an internal matter, he forgets that the public is a part of this activity. It is not internal. The witnesses are there pursuant to the law. The public is there. The news media are there on behalf of all the public who cannot see. This is not an internal item, and the Attorney General knows it, but he is a moral coward. The governor is a moral coward, and I'm going to show you that the Supreme Court is too. I'm going to write them a letter, and I'm going to tell them it might be impertinent. But as an elected official and a human being, it's my responsibility to try to make this appeal to you. And you, on your own motion, which the court can do, and I don't have to have standing to suggest this to them, on your own motion, with all of the questions surrounding this protocol, which a so-called expert changed because it was criticized by me. Changed, just like that. That doesn't show you it's haphazard, that it's cavalier, that it's breezy. The court should satisfy itself that before it allows another execution pursuant to any protocol adopted by the Department of Corrections, that first of all, this is not a barbaric means of inflicting death on a person. Secondly, if you don't want to reach that far, you don't want to touch that issue, then make them adopt their protocol according to the requirements of the Administrative Procedure Act. There would have to be a public hearing. Genuine experts would testify. A record would be made. But I will remind the court that pending before it right now are cases where that record can be used to take a second look at and reevaluate the use of the electric chair. Suspend the executions until you do that. Is that asking a court to do too much? These are supposed to be the ones who state what the law is, and they know that the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is violated by the use of this electric chair and by these documents that the Department of Corrections will use itself to justify what it did. It doesn't bother you that this expert admits that he was wrong. He should have gotten it right the first time. And you know what the model was? Using a person weighing 155 pounds. Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Shimmick.
Thank you, Senator Chambers and Senator Shimmick. There are no other lights on. Senator Chambers, you are recognized to close on FA 89.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I will not have to offer other amendments because when the motion is made to move the bill, I may can speak one or two times, however many I have left. But I look at this John Bruning, and when questions were put to him after his 7-page letter was written to me, I'm going to make a copy and distribute it to all my colleagues. I haven't had time to do that yet. And serious issues were raised. This coward cannot even confront the media and say no comment. The paper points out that his spokesperson said he has no comment. And this is the man who's going to stand up to Chuck Hagel? So we're debating. Senator Hagel, we want to know what you have done while a member of the U.S. Senate that would give Republicans a reason to vote for you as their standard bearer in this upcoming primary for the U.S. Senate seat. And Chuck Hagel will stand up, and he will lay out the things that he has done that benefited the state of Nebraska, the fact that he was willing to take positions which were unequivocal, even when they were highly unpopular. He was willing to stand up to the president, although he supported the president when he thought he was right, and do the kind of talk that Chuck Hagel can do without lying. Then he sits down. We'll now hear from Attorney General John Bruning, known by Senator Chambers as Poor Johnny One Note. No comment, no comment. So, Attorney General Bruning, what do you have to say about what you did as Attorney General? Well, I would like to call on my spokesperson. So she comes up to the mic, and he points to her, he says, tell him. She'd say, with all due respect, the Attorney General has no comment. And that's the way it will go. Those are the kind of officials you all have. That's what's happening in your state. But I'm going to try to stop your state from doing what some of you all may want to see happen. And I'm not going to leave a stone unturned. My colleagues are showing me things. The Attorney General is simply reconfirming things that I've already known about him. And the governor has always been a political creature. But remember, this thing will not be done in a corner. The governor can do something. But he'll be like the Attorney General. I'm not going to get involved. I'm going to be deeply involved throughout. And I'm going to do everything that occurs to me that I can do that is within the law. What can the court tell me if I write them this letter? Go jump in the lake. They can tell me that I'm not going to do it, but I haven't lost anything except some time, wasted some effort, but I also am creating a paper trail. And I'm going to document for the court what I'm saying. And I will send a copy of everything that I send to the court to the Attorney General so that the state will have notice. And nothing that I do and say is going to be a surprise to anybody. But I'm kind of surprised that you all can know that somebody's going to literally be burned alive. Judge Hippie, who took evidence from experts, saw autopsy photos, photos of a body prior to autopsy.
1 minute.
And from the accumulated evidence presented, a person does not suffer instantaneous death. The brain is not cooked. The skull causes the current to flow around the brain and down through the body, and then it can spread through other parts of the body. Nobody knows for sure what course the electricity takes or how much damage it's going to do in advance, because every human body is different and each one reacts differently to the electrical current. And that's why this doctor, after telling them, do it my way, can say, in case of fire, have the fire extinguisher, and then turn off the juice, put out the fire, and then start all over again. That's the expert. That's what Nebraska is going to go for.
Time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the vote on that amendment did not surprise me, but there was an indication that people wanted to know what apology meant, and I made an effort to give some guidance in that regard. This expert had told them, and this is the part of the protocol they will use, that after you have subjected this person to this 2450 volts for 20 seconds now instead of 15, sometime you ought to get a digital clock and just mark off 20 seconds and realize that during that period of time, this voltage is passing through this individual doing nobody knows what. This process has never been used before. It has never been tested. Even the 15-second continuous flow had never been tested. They don't know that at some point, and I've fought against lethal injection, and there's an article in today's paper about a medical report telling you some things about lethal injection, so that is not an acceptable method. And it may be struck down as cruel and unusual before Nebraska's electric chair. It's hard to kill somebody when you're a state, and you ought not do it if you're a state. But this is a bizarre, it's a macabre, it is a vicious, inhumane, immoral activity, ceremonially and ritualistically carried out like any burnt offering or burnt sacrifice in the history of humankind. An execution date in the heart of this legislative session. What is the legislature going to do on that day if the execution occurs? And what is the legislature going to be doing subsequent to that day? We don't have to sit here saying, I wish it hadn't happened. It has not happened. It can be prevented. There are good legal minds in this state. There are some good people with good legal minds, but they don't have the backbone, they don't have the drive, they don't have the sense of civic responsibility to make sure that when the state kills, if it insists on killing, that it ought to do it in a way that comports with the law and human decency. You can burn somebody alive and say he deserved it. I don't think anybody deserves to be burned alive. But even if you say that, you are not just destroying and doing away with the humanity and human dignity of that condemned person. You are doing something to your own humanity, to your own human dignity, to your own sense of decency. That's what you're doing. And you're going to sit and watch it happen and wash your hands like Pilate and say you had nothing to do with it. It's not your responsibility. You're lawmakers. It is your responsibility. But it should touch you somewhere deeper than that. So you might want to fall back on that old saw that if you kill, you should die. And if the state, some people say that the state cannot teach that killing is wrong by killing. Well, as I told a person, you're just like that killer. It just took something else to bring your barbarism out. That's all. But you're just like him. You believe the same way. You're hiding behind the state. You're making it all right, but you're letting other people do your dirt for you. You got these people working at the Department of Corrections. They're doing the dirty work. They're the ones who will do the death watch. They're the ones who will escort the person to the chair. They're the ones who will strap him in. They're the ones who will unstrap him and then strap him back in if they have to. Nobody on this floor is going to do it. The governor's not going to do it. The attorney general is not going to do it. Have somebody else do it. And I think that is wrong and inexcusable. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the members of the legislature, this isn't the last time I'm going to talk about this matter. I'm not going to talk about it on every bill, although maybe I should. How many times have people said on this floor, if you save one life? I realize, however, there are those of us who think some people don't deserve to live, that they are no longer human beings. But there are some people, such as myself, who believe that that point never is reached. That a person born of a woman remains a human being until the day he or she dies. I don't care what that person may have done. and before we become so self-righteous and announce these moral judgments that this person ought not live, will our life withstand scrutiny? You think everybody who got up of a morning knew that by the time the sun set that day, he or she would be a murderer? You think nobody on this floor could be in a set of circumstances where he or she would not do that? You can judge the level of civilization of a society by the way it treats the people who are considered to be the worst. No government should kill its own citizens for any reason. All of the developed countries, except this one, have done away with the death penalty, and not one of them has the level of crime and murder rate of the United States. And some people might say, well, it'd be even worse if you didn't have the death penalty. That doesn't pan out. People are influenced by what those who are supposed to be the opinion makers and trendsetters are doing and saying. And when they are rendered insensitive to people dying because the state kills, when they hear preachers justifying state killing, they hear politicians building their careers on state killings, they have a man like Attorney General John Bruning who wants to ride an execution into a seat in the U.S. Senate. What are they to be expected to do? You kill. You say under the circumstances where you think it's all right, it's all right. Well, I think it's all right too. I just have a different set of circumstances. But the barbarism is there in all of you. You know it, and I know it. But you're afraid to do what you know you ought to do, so why are you even here? When you all are saying those prayers, are there ever any conflicting thoughts in your mind while you're uttering those prayers or listening to them? Or are they just rote words? You just say them because you know them. None of those things you profess to believe have any part to play in how you conduct your affairs. When it comes to the state killing, you're comfortable with that, and you're comfortable with it being done as they intend to do it on May 8th. The ones out there at the department don't know what to do. They keep checking with this doctor right down in Florida, whoever he is. His credentials are never given. If Senator Fulton, as an engineer, worked out a formula, or he was going to construct an edifice, and he had laid everything out, did all of his mathematical calculations, was going to use a building material which was not flawed, and he's calling on his experience and knowledge as an engineer, and he says, this is what I'm going to do. Then somebody not an engineer says, well, that's not going to work. That building's going to collapse. Then he immediately says, oh, then we're going to have to add another pillar on the north side, a pillar on the west side, a pillar on the east side, a pillar on the south side. Somebody would ask him, Fulton, you say you're an engineer, and somebody criticized, and you said this building was going to be sound, and because somebody criticized, you're changing it on the spur of the moment? That's what they did out the Department of Corrections. They changed it on the spur of the moment and still don't know whether it'll work. And you all are at ease with that. That's compatible with your sense of self? Well, it's not compatible with mine. So as long as I'm here, I will find my occasions to try to reach something in you which nothing so far has been able to reach. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.